So if we want you to smile, okay, that's the idea. The major muscles that do that would be what? Buccinator would be a synergist that would aid in it. You're not wrong. Zygomaticus is another one. Right? But there's two of them. Okay. The anytime you're dealing with something with the eyes, that's what we call an ocularis. So the orbicularis oculi goes around the eyes, and the orbicularis oris surrounds the mouth. Okay, those are two muscles that have no insertions because they go in a circle. It's just like when you talk about circles. There's no beginning, and then there's no end. Okay, so that's why they have no natural insertions. Okay, so those are the three. We said perhaps it's not the masseter would aid in that. That more so moves your jaw muscle up and down. And of course, if you're asking if the masseter closes the jaw, well then there's got to be something that opens it. And that's one of the over 600 muscles that would perform that function. Okay, so obviously there's no way we could cover each and every one of these muscles because some of them are actually quite small. Because even when we talk about the skeletal system, do you believe that the ears have any bones in them? Mm-hmm. Yes, there is. It's called the Inca, the Malus, and the Stapes. Okay, and when we call it the Stapes, it just resembles this. Okay, not a stapler in your ear, but rather the staples like this, because what it does is it moves that tympanic membrane to send messages from your ear to your brain so they can be deciphered. Okay, what are possibly some other muscles we discussed yesterday? Okay, so as I look, only one. Mm-hmm. Taylor's muscle is one that you'd use to cross your legs. Okay, and anything else? That's right. It is the surprise muscle.
Morning, CE Hawk. Your Super Bowl week update. We have our elementary who has taken the lead with over $300. Staff with over $150. Junior high and high school, you've got some catching up to do. We got about $30 each.
Okay, so yes, the surprise muscle. So in the cranium, what bone is this? So then we know the muscle name then. Frontalis. Then your orbicularis oris. Okay, and then it's a long muscle that turns your head one way or the other. Okay, so think of these three bone structures here, here, and up here. Okay, so the origin is on the sternum and the clavicle, and then from there it inserts on the mastoid process of the temporal bone, because what happens is insertions get pulled towards their origins, and that's how you keep them separate. Okay, so you could say that origins do not move, which they don't. Okay, and with that, I had a drawing back here. You can just kind of see the edge maybe, but we started talking about these different types of connective, muscular tissue. And we'll go further in depth once we get through here. And we don't spend a lot of time on muscle tissue, but rather just dive into the muscles themselves. Okay. So not a whole lot to write there. We're probably almost halfway done with what we need to write down. I mean, for what we want to cover for this chapter. I know chances are you're going to go further in depth than this in college, okay? But where do you keep going in a chapter and where do you stop? And that's, of course, probably a good question. But you need to have that experience of learning these muscle names, where they're at, and what they do. And of course, in order to do that, it takes time. And it takes a lot of time to do that. Okay, so where does that put us? We got 1, 2. So notice we'll go ahead and try to wrap this up today then. And that way we can focus on these muscular groups then. Have you ever found yourself, I don't picture you being, what do you call it, gamers, video gamers, or what's the appropriate term for that? Do you call them gamers? Okay. So sometimes if you're holding that, you wouldn't say console, what's the right word I'm looking? Controller, okay. You're holding that in your hand, and sometimes one of your, I believe, vocab terms is like an all or none principle or a threshold stimulus or something like that. Sometimes what happens is I pressed that button, but no, you didn't because you didn't pass that threshold stimulus. So sometimes you don't contract with the appropriate amount of force to have a muscle contraction take place. But with that, these are your major components that make up all muscle tissue, okay? Because what happens is, remember, muscles get shorter because they pull, they don't push. And what happens is one side will shift and then they slide past one another like this. That's basically how a muscle starts to contract, and it happens in a whole bunch of areas, and it doesn't contract at the end. It contracts where in a muscle? Yeah, in the middle. So whether you're looking at your masseter, that's why it bulges out when you clench your jaw, okay? Because it's getting shorter in the middle. Same thing with your biceps or your triceps. Those start to bulge out in the middle because that's where they're flexing, towards the middle. And of course, the cartoons get them wrong if they, like Scooby, maybe. Of course, dogs really can't flex their arms, their legs maybe, you could say. But they do that, and then what does their muscle tissue do? It flops down. Maybe you've never seen that in cartoons before. Okay, but yeah, they get that wrong. But regardless, these are the major protein components that make up your muscle fibers. And how would you keep them separate? Well, what happens if you just picture putting an H in here? So actin is thin. So if you put these two together, that's maybe how you can keep them separate. Actin is thin. Because now you got to be careful how you look at that, because it also you could say it rhymes with myosin as well. So I don't know how you want to try to keep that designation separate, but it's perhaps whatever might work for yourself. Okay. And then let's see here. And we've got I think this is the last one, right? Yep. Okay. And it's unfortunate, and I think we discussed this briefly in the nervous system chapter, but something like Lou Gehrig's disease or ALS, I think there's just a minor distinction between those two, but Parkinson's is the unfortunate disease that maybe gets talked about the most. What is it that Parkinson's would have, what do I want to say, the greatest effect on? Would it be the neuromuscular junction, do you think, or the motor neuron? And I wouldn't expect that you know this or remember talking about this, but maybe you do. Because what happens is the examples that we give is maybe if you've noticed people, and they don't always have to be older. It's unfortunate that people in their 30s and 40s can get diagnosed with this. But if they're holding something like even a glass of water, if they're in advanced stages of Parkinson's, what would that look like? Exactly what you're doing. And it would be really tough to do something like this. But I think there are certain medications. It's not a cure for Parkinson's, but how can someone perhaps manage Parkinson's with a medication? It doesn't cure them, but it might treat what? This would be called a symptom. So if you can treat the symptoms, it may extend their quality of life just a little bit longer. And again, it's just unfortunate that people may be diagnosed with that and come down with Parkinson's. But you were correct. What did you say? Yeah, the motor neuron. Because you might think, well, it's got to be here. No, that's not the case, because Parkinson's, what it does is it affects that nerve fiber, so it doesn't even get to a full signal to the neuromuscular junction. So some get through, some don't, but it happens on the motor neuron. That's right. Okay. So I think it's safe to say we can shut this down for now. Okay, so what you see here, if we put this into context and say, oh yeah, that looks just like what it is we want to be talking about. Okay, I don't know how, hopefully not ignorant we are, but it is the general idea of what it is we're trying to accomplish. I think there's got to be a better picture than that. There's one on page 294. Or, let's see here. Maybe we're going to have to go with the one on page 294. Okay. But I don't. Oh, there's got to be a better picture than that. Let's try this one. Okay, this is a decent picture here. Okay, so with what you had wrote down, this extreme outer layer of this muscle fiber, is it the paramecium, endomecium, or epimecium, do you think? When you think of your skin, you have a subcutaneous layer or an endodermis, a dermis layer, and then an epidermis layer. Okay? But what is the living or the non-living portion of the skin that we actually see? The dermis or the epidermis? Which one? Okay, which one of those two is right? You sure? No, I don't know. What does your lab partner say? Yeah. Okay. So then this is the epimysium out here on all of these bundles. Okay. Just like an epidermis is the outer layer of the skin. So that's what we'd be visualizing here. And then a whole group of bundles like this then, okay, would be what we call a paramecium, okay? All these bundles in here. I don't like getting these mixed around, but okay. And then I think there's just one left, and then that was the endomysium. I'm not looking at that right. I need to magnify that because I can't see that. I goofed. Okay. This structure that surrounds all these is the paramecium. It's not all them bundles together. Okay? Then each one of these all together is called the endomysium.
Wait, can you say that again?
Okay? So all throughout here, surrounding this is the paramecium. The outer structure here is called the epimecium. And then each one of these, okay, not the surrounding tissue, but all these together is called the endomysium. And then sticking out of there is the smallest unit, and that would, it's not actin, it's not myosin, but it's a type of fiber. And it's a myofiber. Yep. All right. So I don't know how well that can be seen on the screen here, but hopefully that gives us a little bit of context. So then the last thing we want to do, okay, would be, let's see here, I got to think muscles of the face now. We did, okay, the sternocleidomastoid, we did the masseter, the buccinator, zygomaticus, the two orbicularis muscles. So I want to get this hashed out to what's in group 1, because I think there's only 10. Oh yeah. The masseter we talked about, and then when you clench your jaw, okay, your masseter muscle flexes, but there's also a synergist that aids that, and it's up here, and this would be called what? This muscle. That's what we're asking you. Yes, temporalis. It is a muscle, okay? Because the temporal bone is directly beneath it. Of course, the sternocleidomastoid, I think we said that. And then, seems like I'm in the frontalis, we said that. I think that's got to be pretty close to 8, 9, or 10. Okay? But we can discuss that a little later. But as far as we're concerned, that's all we want or need to cover today. So we'll catch up to you next time.